Let's go over the video settings for your iPhone. The first thing that you want to do is head into your settings application and turn on airplane mode. It disconnects your phone from the internet and your mobile network, so you won't be receiving any texts or phone calls while you are recording your video. While you're on airplane mode, you can also turn on your Wi-Fi. So with Wi-Fi on, remember that you'll still be receiving notifications from other apps that you use, for example, Instagram or Facebook. So keep that in mind. Now, if you do not want to receive anything at all while you are recording your video, you can go down to Do Not Disturb. And with Do Not Disturb, if you turn that on, you won't receive any texts, phone calls, notifications. But you can also tweak any settings that you want to in regards to Do Not Disturb. So for now, I'm just going to turn my Wi-Fi off. So the next thing you want to do is go all the way down to Camera within your Settings app. So as you can see here, within the Camera app, you have all these different settings. Let's start at the top. Preserve settings. You have camera mode, creative controls, and live photo. We're just going to focus on camera mode. The reason why I have camera mode on is because I take a lot of video. So whenever I go to my camera app, I want to make sure that it's on video. So when I go to my camera app, you can see that it's on the video tab already. So we'll go back. If you have it off, the camera app is always going to be at photo in terms of the default setting. So I like to keep it at video. Okay, now let's go to grid. When I turn on grid, you'll see that when we go back to the camera app, there's horizontal and vertical lines. It's basically like a guide. So it's to make sure that everything is level on your screen and whatever you're filming is in the section of the screen that you want it to be. I usually use the grid for interviews, but whenever you take a video and you're using grid, that grid will not be shown on the actual video that you're recording. But I just keep it off just because I don't use it all the time. Scan QR codes, we don't use that. Next is record video. And within record video, you can see that you have all these different recording options. You see the resolution, 720p HD, 1080p HD, all the way down to 4K. So resolution refers to the quality of your video. When you look at this chart, you can see that video recorded at 720p is a much smaller size in comparison to a video that's 1080p or recorded in 4K. So the higher the resolution, the bigger the video size. And then you have your frame rates. So when it comes to frame rate, think of an animated flipbook with a character drawn on every single page. As you flip through all the pages quickly, that character starts to move. So likewise, when it comes to frames in a video, each frame is like the page of a flipbook. When you put all those frames together and play it back, it turns into a motion picture, which is your video. So when we say 30 frames per second, that means our eyes see 30 frames per second in motion being played back to us. FPS stands for frames per second. So you have 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 24 frames per second, and so on. It also gives you a description of each recording option. So a minute of video will be approximately a file size of 40 megabytes with 720p HD resolution at 30 frames per second, and this option will help save you storage space on your phone. Next is 60 megabytes with 1080p HD at 30 frames per second, and this is the default recording setting, which I use most of the time. After that, you have 90 megabytes with 1080p HD at 60 frames per second, and it says smoother. I use this setting when I want to record slow motion video. I'm able to slow the video down in the editing process. However, if you watch the video back at 60 frames per second, movement is going to look too smooth to the eye, and it's not going to look natural in comparison to watching a video at 30 frames per second. Next, you have 135 megabytes with 4K at 24 frames per second, and it says film style. Most movies that you watch are played at 24 frames per second, and it gives you that cinematic look. So keep in mind, recording at 4K is going to give you a higher resolution video, meaning the file sizes are going to be larger. So you can see below it says auto low light frames per second, and it says it automatically reduces the frame rate from 30 frames per second to 24 frames per second to improve low light video. I just turned that off because I don't want any shifts in frame rates when I'm shooting video. All right, so now with all of that set for record video, we're going to go down to record slow-mo. So when we head into slow-mo, you have two options. The first is you can record 1080p HD video at 120 frames per second, and the other is 1080p HD at 240 frames per second. I record slow-mo at 1080p HD at 120 frames per second because the video quality is better and the slow motion is still great. Next, you have record stereo sound. I have that turned on just because my phone is able to record with multiple microphones. However, if I turn that off, it'll only record on one microphone. You can still get good quality audio doing that. So within format, you have two options. The first is high efficiency and the other is most compatible. I record mostly at 1080p HD at 30 frames per second, so I'm going to choose most compatible to get the best quality out of my video. However, if you record at 4K at 60 frames per second or 1080p at 240 frames per second, it's going to require that you record using high efficiency. Now, if you choose most compatible, if we go back to record video, you can see that the file sizes are larger. So keep that in mind if you choose to record with most compatible. So now you're good to go with your settings, and let's go into the camera application. All right, so now that we have our settings down, let's head into the camera app. As you can see, this is what the interface looks like. You have different camera options below. There's time-lapse, slow-mo, video, photo, portrait, square, and pano. We're only going to be focusing on time-lapse, slow-mo, and video. Right here on the top right is your switch camera button. So when you press that, we're going to switch to the front camera. We're shooting with the front camera right now. We press it again and switch back to the back camera. Down below here in this square is your photo video library. You press that and you can watch any videos or look at photos that you have already taken. On the top is your recording time code. So when you press record, it'll start counting up and show you how long you have been recording. This lightning bolt with a slash through it, that is your flash. So when you press it, right now it's off. You can turn it on, and that is your camera's flashlight. So your camera flashlight will turn on. And when you press auto, you basically leave it up to your phone to determine whether it turns the flash on or off. I just keep it off because whenever I need extra light, I just bring in extra light to light up the scene. So let's start with video. So right now in video, everything is set to auto. That includes your focus and exposure. Exposure is your brightness. So I'm able to tap on where I want the focus and exposure to shift. I tapped on the apple there, and I can tap on the orange, and you can see the brightness changes on the screen, and now the orange is in focus. But we don't want to leave it up to our camera to make those decisions for us, because let's say we are filming outside, the light can shift in our video, and even the focus, and we can get out of focus when we're speaking to the camera. In order to lock down our settings, the best way to do that is just by holding down where we want to lock our exposure and focus. So as you can see right here, an icon pops up, auto exposure, autofocus, lock is on. We can also hold down right here where the orange is, and you can see that those settings are locked in as well. Now you can adjust the exposure, the brightness of your video, just by swiping up and down on the screen with your finger. If you swipe up too much, the video is bright and overexposed. If you swipe down too much, your video is dark and underexposed. You want to find that sweet spot to where your video looks as natural as possible. So we'll keep it right there. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind is that when you are using your front-facing camera, you can see that there's that yellow box around your face. That means you have focus tracking on your face. But the only thing you can lock down in terms of settings is, if I hold down on my face, is only exposure. So you can only lock that down. You can still control it with your finger, but that's the only thing you can lock down. Okay, so now let's head down to slow-mo. So in slow-mo, remember that in our settings, we already have our recording set to 1080p HD at 120 frames per second. We want to make sure, just like in our video, we want to lock down our settings. So we're going to hold down on the Apple. All our settings are locked. And let's press record. Show some movement with the Apple. Perfect. Okay. I'm going to stop recording. And we can actually go back to our video library and watch the video in slow motion, as you can see right now. So that's pretty cool. Okay, another cool thing is we're going to pause the recording, and we can actually edit what section of that video we want to be in slow-mo. So we press edit right here on the top and see this little gap, it's a little stretched out gap. That's where the slow motion is going to happen. So you can actually control what section of the video you want to be in slow motion. So as you can see, I drag the points there. Okay. Let's say we just want it to be just a really short section of that video. We're going to play the video back and drag the indicator to the left. So you can see its natural movement until it hits this point, and then it's slow-mo until it hits the next point and it's back to normal movement. Okay, so that's another cool trick that you can do for your slow-mo video. Now let's head into time-lapse. So a time-lapse is a video that has really fast-paced movement, and it's great for showing the passing of time. Now, your iPhone really makes shooting time-lapses simple. Whether you are recording time-lapse for 5 minutes or recording a time-lapse for an hour, your iPhone is going to spit out a video clip that is 20 seconds to 40 seconds long. The reason why it does that is because it saves space on your phone, but for the most part, you're only going to be using maybe 4 to 5 seconds of that actual 20-second video clip for your film. Right now, there's not a lot of movement going on. That's why when you decide to shoot a time-lapse, choose locations, choose scenes that have a lot of movement. So same thing for time-lapse. You want to make sure you lock down your settings before you press record. Okay, so now that you have a better understanding of the iPhone's camera app, let's head over and check out another app that will help increase the quality of your video.